recording. Okay, hello, Reagan.
Hello, Gloria.
How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you for coming. I'm so glad that you were interested in doing this.
Of
And I'm
course.
really excited that you're going to be reading your chapter book, the first chapter. So if you can tell us a little bit about that. Yes, Peter Littlewing.
Yeah. Well, let me read the back blurb so that encapsulates the story for you before I get into chapter one.
Okay.
Okay, so Peter, captive Southern Fiordland tokoeka, kiwi, and his friends from the National Aquarium, Onion, a little blue penguin with an inner ear imbalance, Tim, a tuatara with generalized anxiety disorder, and Rangi, a kea with clipped wings, embark on a quest through the unfamiliar wilderness of New Zealand in search of three ingredients needed to create an elixir to cure Peter's ailing grandfather. Together, they traverse the length of the South Island of Aotearoa, all the way across the Cook Strait and back home to the North Island. They learn what they are all capable of in the wild of the Wop Wops and what the world beyond the walls of shadows of Peter's habitat is all about. And again, Peter and his grandfather are Kiwi. So, yeah,
Kiwis.
yes.
So, and they are from where you said? New Zealand?
New Zealand, yes. Also,
Mm.
Aotearoa in the Maori indigenous language. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah,
Okay. Interesting. I'm
yeah.
so excited. I can't wait to hear this first chapter. So, Regan Macaulay, who is not only a children's book writer, but also writes adult books as well. But
I do.
today she's going to be reading Peter Littlewing, the first chapter. So, I'm going to just let you continue and then we'll go from there.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay, so chapter one of Peter Littlewing. Here we go. Okay. Peter Littlewing shrank behind a scrubby tauhinu bush as two human staffers at the New Zealand National Aquarium entered the kiwi habitat carrying a brown crate. I don't know if he's going to make it, said one of the humans. The woman in a dark blue aquarium uniform opened the carrier and gently lifted out Peter's Nandy Enzo, which was what Peter called his grandfather, though Enzo was his proper name. The haggard kiwi looked more like wilted flax that had dried in the sun than a Southern Fiordland tokoeka. He's too weak, said the other human worker. Let's carry him to his burrow. Peter's infinitesimal wings squeezed against his rib cage beneath his shaggy, brown, fur-like feathers. He held his breath as the humans placed his Nandy into the topmost burrow at the back of their enclosure. Peter had only caught a glimpse of his grandfather's thin, withered feathers, all various shades of brown with a touch of gray. But it was enough for Peter to allow a deep sigh to escape his long, cream-colored beak and for him to ruffle his own feathers. Peter pulled his head in towards his chest. His whiskers fanned out, sending a shiver in a wave from the top of his skull to his nostrils at the tip of his beak. The dark walls of the kiwi habitat seemed to draw in closer. Even the vague shadows that often peered in on Peter's family from the other side of the walls of shadows seemed to press in around him, darkening his heart. The humans rose and stepped away from Nandy's burrow. He's not as far gone as he looks. The taller human placed his hand on the smaller human's shoulder. I know, the woman replied, as she gathered up the boxy carrier they had brought Nandy in. I can't help but think of what happened to Enzo's son, Peter's da. We weren't able to save him. Peter's feathers bristled as the humans mentioned his father, whom he had never met. How would Nandy be saved if his father wasn't? We'll figure it out. We're in touch with the best zoologists, biologists, and ornithologists. The humans exited through a door in the back of the habitat, shutting out their speech, so Peter did not hear the rest. With a sniff, the young kiwi sprang from his sturdy, branch-like feet and dashed out from behind the tauhinu bush, aiming for Nandy's little cave. Before he got within 3 hops of its entranceway, a larger kiwi stepped into his path. Peter almost collided with his Aunt Myrtle. His mother's sister nudged him away from Nandy's burrow. He's resting, Peter. Give it some more time and he'll be strong enough to see you. Let me in, Auntie. I can help. Now, now, young one. Do as you're told and keep out of trouble until you're at least 4 years old. Maybe then you'll be useful. After one last prod, Aunt Myrtle kicked dirt up into the burrow's entrance, blocking the way inside. You can't keep me from Nandy. Peter turned from the semi-caved-in opening and strutted back towards the scraggly scrub that he had hidden behind moments earlier. You don't know what I can do. He kicked a pebble over the pile of leaf litter. You haven't been outside our habitat. Peter rooted listlessly through the soil for a juicy worm, excuse me, snuffling noisily through his nostrils. No worms right now. No delicious bugs of any kind. No extra berries or biscuits. The staffers must not have topped up the supply for the day. The young kiwi clawed at the fern frills that sprung around a number of his favorite haunts. The twisted tree, behind the human-made waterfall that babbled happily into the clear pond below, the pile of wood in the corner. I wish I was 4 and not still 3. When our young ones turn 4, they leave the nest and head into the world beyond their burrow, Nandy Enzo used to tell him. Into the wilderness, the wop-wops of Aotearoa, land of the long white cloud. If I were old enough to leave, then my family would take me seriously. Not that Peter could leave, what with the walls of shadows. Not permanently, anyway. He was not supposed to know anything about the world beyond their meticulously crafted exhibit. None of them were ever meant to leave their snug burrows, unlike the kiwi of the wop-wops. The wop-wops, or the wilderness, were the opposite of domesticity and captivity. Every night for as long as Peter could remember, his Nandy Enzo had spun tales about the history of kiwi and about the world of the far-flung wop-wops. Such tales kept Peter struggling to stay awake as long as he could, as if sleep were chasing him and he were running to keep ahead of it. His Nandy recounted stories of the Fiordland tokoeka kiwi, who lived at the tip of Waipunamu, the South Island. There were no captive kiwi locked behind dark walls there. Peter's eyes fixed on the swirling emerald fern leaves before him. His vision gave way to a memory. In an almost 3-year-old mist-edged remembrance, a young, smaller version of Peter yawned as his Nandy Enzo tucked the twigs, leaves, and grass into the warm nest around him. An earthy aroma hung inside the cave. The close air was like an embrace. Tell me again where our stories and songs come from, Nandy. Stories and songs are my favorite. So they are for most birds and most animals, for that matter, Nandy Enzo chuckled, a warmth emanating from his smile that made Peter feel safe. Mika, the great spotted kiwi, ancient kiwi of long ago, sister of all kiwi under the long, white cloud of New Zealand. Even us, Nandy Enzo? Even us, the Southern Fiordland tokoeka kiwi. Enzo grinned and his eyes twinkled. Mika knew the ways of the world and its history from the mystical voice deep inside her heart. It was Mika who told the stories of the world to her daughter and sang the songs of the wild to her son. Nandy smoothed the cowlick of feathers on Peter's head. Other birds, like the blue-feathered ukeko, the white-throated tui, and the sweet-singing kokako, passed on their stories too. And the children of Mika told their stories, their children their stories, and their children told their children. The story was sung from family to family, friend to friend. Peter vibrated with excitement. But the stories changed, didn't they? That's right. The heart of the story remained the same, but some storytellers made small changes and added their own details. And then all the animals on the islands told stories and sang songs to teach each other. Yes, Peter. And you put together every story from all the animals, you get a patchwork tale of our world. But it's incomplete without the deep understanding. Peter blinked at his recollection of the deep understanding as if waking from a dream. He sniffed the air. It was stale as usual, not what the air's like outside. Peter kicked a pebble with his middle toe. What's wrong with my grandfather, and how do I fix him? If you think hard enough, the solution will come, his Nandy would say. You have to search the world around you with the deep understanding in your heart. Take that and add it to what you think you know, and you will sort out the truth. Nandy Enzo was wise, so he must be right. But I have nothing to go on. Peter stared resolutely at the stone he had punted. Peter? The young Kiwi stumbled and turned to face his Uncle Lloyd. Your Nandy, he's stirring now. We thought you might like to pay him a visit. Lloyd scratched at his unusually dark whiskers with the toes of his right foot. Peter followed Uncle Lloyd back to Nandy Enzo's burrow, which Aunt Myrtle had dug out again. Bess, Peter's cousin, and Miss Elsa, his grandmother on his mother's side, hovered around the perimeter of Nandy's lair. Aunt Myrtle's small face was twisted like a drooping she-oak with too much on its mind. Bess smiled kindly at Peter, but he noted sadness in her eyes. Miss Elsa's eyes, however, pierced sharply, like they were poking right through the back of his head. Peter looked away from her as he passed into the burrow. Nandy's den seemed darker and drabber than it had in Peter's memory. The air was claustrophobic instead of comforting. Muted noises from outside were the only sounds Peter's sensitive ears picked up, and they seemed so far away. Nandy Enzo rested on a pile of grass and loose earth. It looked inviting enough, but Peter was gripped with a tightness in his gizzard. Nandy had never looked so delicate before. Oh, Peter, come over here, a bit closer now. Peter hung back. He felt a desire within to rush up to his grandfather and pull him out of the nest in a great panic. Instead, Peter choked on the words he wanted to say and froze. I won't fight, Nandy wheezed. Peter hovered a little closer, then closer still. He crept up to his Nandy and touched his brow against his grandfather's forehead. A hongy. Now, son, don't be afraid. We'll figure this out. Oh, we have the deep understanding. And there's this. That is a hongy.
A hongy?
A hongy.
Oh,
Maori word for sharing the breath of life where you touch noses.
okay.
Peter lifted his head. He fixated on the feathers rising and falling upon Nandy's ribcage as the old Kiwi struggled to breathe. Is this what it looked like when my da was crook? Peter's vision blurred as he stared. His thoughts carried him away in a wind of remembrance. The deep understanding is a powerful feeling inside the heart of all animals, which speaks to their minds and emotions in vague but powerful ways. It is always true, so long as you listen with a clear and unfettered heart. Young Peter rubbed his eyes against his sides. What does unfettered mean? Nandy Enzo smiled back. It means free. The free or unfeathered heart, with its deep understanding, has guided animals for millions of years. Even humans once possessed this understanding. It is all but lost to them now. Have we forgotten too? Do we have the deep understanding even though we're captives? The memory of Peter's youthful question rang in his ears. He snapped back to the present when he met his Nandy's glazed gaze. We can't expect much help from the humans. They just don't know what's wrong. Nandy Enzo sneezed, and a shiver like ice ran along Peter's spine. Nandy's brown, wilting feathers swelled, then fell again as he heaved a sigh. Peter swayed on the spot. He opened his beak as he searched for his mind for words. Nothing came out. I'm just a bit knackered is all, don't fret. Come back later and we'll sing some stories. And his grandfather was asleep. Peter turned and climbed out of the burrow, his cheeks burning and his insides churning. As he reached the den hole, Peter was met by the rest of his Kiwi family. They circled around and watched him closely. He explored the expressions on their faces. Their collective gaze was heavy. Peter opened his beak. I didn't know what to say to him. Bess rushed up and put her neck around him in an embrace. You didn't have to say anything. Her voice shook. Peter pulled away. I should have said something while he was still awake. It's all right, Peter. Uncle Lloyd took a step towards him. Peter did not find his uncle's hesitant tone reassuring. I thought I could be braver than all our Kiwi ancestors from Nandy's stories. Worry ate at the edges of Peter's skin. When it really mattered, I couldn't say anything. Shame drizzled from the top of his head to the tips of his toes like an electric sweat. Humph! Miss Elsa sniffed, interrupting whatever reply Bess might have given. I doubt the human's foul medicines jammed into the side of his beak or injected into his thigh or anything fancy like that will cure Enzo. No, no. It didn't work for Louis, so it won't work miracles now. Peter bristled upon Miss Elsa's mention of his father. But there must be something we can do. Peter held back a glare as an anxious pick stabbed at his heart. Us? A heap of captive kiwi? I suppose a young upstart like you will succeed where even our human caretakers have failed. Ha! Miss Elsa snorted, dislodging a bit of dirt from her nostril, sending it through the air towards the burrow. It landed neatly along the top rim of the entranceway. Peter couldn't help but sneak at it with a sideways glance. Normally he would have to stifle a chortle, but this time the mood felt too somber. But you just said their human medicines aren't going to work. Heat inflamed Peter's face. He struggled to keep his voice even. The boy's right on that count. Miss Elsa was apparently oblivious to her dirt booger projectile. The humans are ignorant. We're going to have to figure out a way to tell them what Nandy Enzo requires. How in the name of nature are you going to do that? Lloyd's voice rose with every word he spoke. You going to walk up to a human when they come in to do maintenance and just natter at them? Think they'll know what you're on about? What do you suggest? Miss Elsa puffed out her aging feathers. They vibrated with hostility. It's just silly as all. I don't have any idea what we should do. Aunt Myrtle joined in, a hint of sarcasm tainting her voice. That's very useful. She then turned her attention to the fussing and grooming of Uncle Lloyd's feathers despite his protests. Peter sighed loudly. Do you know what he needs? There was a significant pause while Peter waited. What would you tell the humans to do if you could? Miss Elsa cocked her head. She scratched at the earth with two of her toes, making circular patterns in the earth while Peter's patience grew thinner. Then she hummed a tune. Peter thought he might have recognized it. Had he heard this tune while inside his egg? Did Nandy Enzo used to sing him to sleep this way? Miss Elsa snapped her head back up, and her beak wagged. It's a matter of ingredients. What ingredients? Peter took a quick step forward. That's the difficult part. The song is from the time of our ancestors from the Wop Wops. It's been going round and round in my head for days now. It must have the answers we need. But none of you have ever seen or smelled the items mentioned in this song. You were all born in captivity. I haven't likely either. So I do not know the names of these ingredients, boy. Peter's gizzard rose at Miss Elsa's mention of never having smelled or seen items from the wild. Peter's secret surfaced in his mind, but his heart sank. What good is that to us, then? Now, boy, try to be patient. Patience is a virtue every winged creature on the island should have in abundance. Patience and caution, caution and precaution, precaution and prudence and vigilance, constant vigilance. Peter felt his eyes roll and quickly stared back at the ground. He lifted his face to Miss Elsa again. Is there anything you can tell? Oh, sorry. Sorry about my lights. There. I don't know if I can get them to go back on again. All right. Oh, well.
That's okay.
Now, boy. Oh, I've done that. Okay. Yes, of course, boy. Now, let me see. It's a rhyme in 3 verses. We've all heard it. Haven't the foggiest what it means, but I'm sure it's important. Remember, Kiwi, when under the weather, take this mixture in perfect measure. Meal from the dust of the oily wood tree. Gold-banded stabber folk make remedy. Bid adieu to the germs on your insides. Say goodbye to the bugs on your outsides. Peter was dumbfounded by the sing-song lullaby. Suddenly, Bess chimed in. Yes, I've heard this. You used to sing it to me, Mum. She nuzzled against Aunt Myrtle's side and proceeded to sing the second verse. At the muscle of this animal chest, with colors bright as sunset in the west, grind its stone armor and extract you'll find, and salt from the ocean for gizzard to grind. With vitamins you'll be rejuvenated. From lethargy you'll be liberated. Aunt Myrtle picked up the tune. Gather the petals of the crimson bloom, collect its dust for the stabber folk consume. Petals like starbursts stem the bleeding. Fine powder dust gives pain no feeling. Stir and warm each item overnight, and then you will find that all is put right. And that's all. That's more like a riddle than a nursery rhyme, Peter muttered. Might as well just retell old history stories to Nandy and see if that does him any good. How is anyone supposed to figure that out? Don't be a hard case, boy. You've far too much bitterroot in your blood for such a young one, Miss Elsa snorted. But the humans won't recognize these ingredients. Bess glanced at Peter with a glint in her eye that told him arguing would do no good. Humans aren't in touch with a deep understanding. They've drifted away from it. Oh, she's right, said Uncle Lloyd after a prolonged but not unusual absence from the conversation. They never see what's right in front of them. I'm not sure we'd do better. How would we recognize anything outside our habitat? When Bess glanced at Peter again, he thought of his adventures she was helping him keep secret. A song he often heard playing throughout the aquarium during the nights of his escapes jumped to mind. Hit the trail down an old dirt road. That's just fine. I've always said it's too dangerous out there anyway. Best to stay in here where we belong. Miss Elsa's eyes flashed over Peter. He felt a sting in her stare. Did she know about his nighttime escapes? Look now, how does any of this help my da? We can't just let him cark it. Lloyd's voice trailed off. The rest of the family continued to squawk on about the terrors of the world outside and all the fearful things they'd find if they were out among the non-captive creatures of the wop-wops, the ingredients Nandienzo required, surely being just as dangerous in some unknown way. Peter stalked off, allowing the dilemma to sink in without the pressure of the family. He knew that there was no way to communicate these needs to the staff at the aquarium. Even if they could, the humans wouldn't make any sense out of these clues. They were only human beings, after all. An idea gnawed at him, returning him to his memories as a chick. I should like to go outside on a real adventure to the Wop-Wops, out in the middle of nowhere. Young Peter quickly suppressed a yawn. Perhaps someday you shall, Peter Littlewing, replied Nandienzo. But remember this, captivity is not a bad place. Inside can be good in some ways and bad in others, but so can the Wop-Wops. Whether you are captive or wild, always listen to the voice inside you with an unfettered heart. It will tell you what you need to know with a clarity that Miss Elsa's tall tales never will. Peter watched as Nandienzo chortle and sigh between drooping eyelids. Nandy pushed in more warm feathers and twigs around him, then he whispered to Peter one last time before sleep sped him away to the land of dreams. Ah, little one, if only your parents had lived to see what a brave and intelligent kiwi you are growing up to be. Shoved off, the song continued to play in Peter's mind. On my own. I have to unriddle the riddles. I'll go into the Wop-Wops and find the ingredients. But I won't go alone. That's it.
They have a lot going on there, right?
Oh, yes.
Kind of leaves you to wonder if when the birds are chirping, that are they actually having all those types of conversations with each
Yes.
other, right?
Knows, right?
Yeah. It's funny. That's what I was thinking as you were, telling the story. I'm like, that's a lot of conversation that those birds are having,
Yes. Yes, and they're all making their little kiwi whistles at each other.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So where did you come up with the idea for this book?
Well, it was after a trip to New Zealand that I went on with my husband back in 2003, just a year before we got married. We kind of did the honeymoon first because that's what our schedules allowed for. So we visited the South Island first for 2 weeks, and then the North Island for 2 weeks, and had incredible adventures at all these wonderful places and met all these wonderful people, very, very hospitable and kind people in Aotearoa. And the animals were just amazing and so unique. And New Zealand is a place where, in the beginning, there was only one mammal before humans got there and brought a lot of mammals with them. The only mammal happened to be flighted, which would be the bat, which is ironic because the mammals of New Zealand, or the apex animals, were birds. It's just full of birds, and it still is today, of course, but it was just such an incredibly inspiring place and so unique and so different. So when we got home from that beautiful place, knew I had to write a story and set it there. And I always have a tendency to write characters that are animals. So being so inspired by the wonderful animals of New Zealand, including many that are endemic there and you can only find there. I just, the characters came to me fairly quickly after that, and the story along with them.
That sounds good. Wow. So, yeah, that really makes you kind of want to read more,
Yeah, I hope
more of
so.
the chapters. So, how many chapters is that book?
23.
23
23.
chapters. So it's a
It's a
fair book.
proper, yeah, proper novel, a middle grade novel. Yeah,
Middle
yeah,
grade.
yeah,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So that
That's
means eight and up can enjoy it. I like to say, I like to say 8 and up as opposed to 8 to 12, which is the middle grade age, I should say, because I've had a number of adult readers tell me they really enjoyed it as well, and it is intended for anybody, really.
right. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like it, but from what you were reading. So
Yeah.
that's good. Um, so in your opinion, what do you think makes a great story?
Well, engaging characters with like that you can truly relate to, and find reason to love and want to follow on whatever their journey is, basically. As well as, of course, I guess the plot itself. Is this a story, that you want to be whisked away on? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it
Yeah.
has to really inspire people too, right?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
keep their interest and for
and
sure.
and some universal truths are good in there, like despite the fact that these are animal characters, the truths that this fictional story does tell is meant for us humans, after all. So yeah,
Right,
no
to
matter
learn
where you
something
come from.
from and yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. So is there any advice that you might have for those who are listening in right now in regards to writing a book or picking a book that you like or whatever the case may be?
Well, for writing a book, I would say, once well, actually, patience and persistence.
Yeah, patience.
Um,
I would
yes,
say,
when you're
yeah,
writing it, and persistence in that you're going to have to revise and revise again and again, and get many readers' eyes on it, and thoughts on it, and persistence again, and patience when you're trying to find a publisher if you're not publishing it yourself. Um, so, because there are bound to be many rejection letters. Peter Littlewing racked up many, 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 many before we found Pandemonium Publishing House.
yeah,
So yeah, it's that's what I would recommend for writers. For readers, I would say keep your mind open to many different kinds of stories from many different kinds of angles. You'd be surprised what will still resonate with you. And yeah, check out the blurbs on the back of the book, not just the cover.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, just because the cover might not interest you at that moment,
Yeah,
what the story might be about might keep you, going, right? And wanting
exactly.
to read
Yes.
more. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I know when I was younger, that's what I looked for. I would look at the cover and it was like,
Mhm.
oh, that I don't like that one. Well, okay, I don't like the cover, but the story itself
Right,
might
right.
be more interesting, might interest me, right? So
And that's
yeah.
that is actually
Yeah.
why the cover is so important. Actually, you want to try to try your best to try to draw somebody in, and what it is that's on the back blurb, what's in there. If if the cover can somehow convey that, so that people are interested enough to turn around
There you
and read it
go.
and then be drawn in. That's
And you know
that's
what? I like your cover. Your cover is very bright, very inviting. And it really brings out the colors of the birds.
yes, yes.
And I love how you brought in all these different types of, birds and everything, because a lot of those, I mean, I've never even heard of.
I know,
And
right? Yeah.
which tells me there's probably a lot of people and children who have never heard of these either, because I've never been to the Netherlands. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I've never
well,
been there. So
so particularly people who are outside of New Zealand are, yeah, are going to be, um yeah, very, very intrigued by these unusual birds. Of course, children in Aotearoa are more likely to be familiar with these critters,
Mhm.
but but not necessarily know tons and tons about them, depending, you know. But I do want to give a big shout out to Gordon Bagshaw, who illustrated the interiors and the cover there. So like these gorgeous
Oh, the
illustrations.
pictures, yeah.
Yeah, he's amazing, and he's already working on the cover and the inner illustrations for book two. This is a series of four, maybe five, but so far four books. So
Mm.
I'm looking forward to bringing out more of that and bringing more information about Aotearoa and its beautiful creatures, especially the endemic ones and especially the endangered ones, many, many, many endangered ones, um, bringing more information about them out there through a fictional tale, though.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Okay. So even though it's fictional, there could be some truths in there that
There are, absolutely. I mean,
yeah.
about, these are real animals and this is a
Mhm.
real place. So,
So
you
their
know,
habitats are real within the
yep,
story, and
yep.
so that's
And
really
the places are
interesting.
real, the cities and so forth. The National Aquarium of New Zealand is a place, and it is in Napier, a city in the North Island on Hawke's Bay on the coast there. And
Okay.
yeah, so you're still, learning about this amazing place and these amazing creatures, but at the same time, you're being entertained by a story.
Yeah, for sure. And that's
Yeah.
great. I have to ask you too, what was the most difficult part in writing Peter Littlewing? What would you
Um,
say would be the most difficult that you had?
I probably just getting the New Zealand content and the Maori content right, or as right as I could. And that involved having an editor from New Zealand as well to
Oh,
help
okay.
me not only edit it, but because also Pandemonium Publishing House, of course, they have an editor who did the edit as well. But this editor kept an eye out in particular for New Zealand's interests, if you will.
Yeah, things that
Yeah,
he knew that perhaps the editors at publishing at Pandemonium did not
exactly.
relate to, right? Did not know.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. This is
that's
Judy
good.
Moore at Black Wolf Editing and editorial services, I should say. And she was integral to the accuracy that I was able to manage with this. But I also had a Maori sensitivity reader look over it as well, and I have another a Maori sensitivity reader assessing my second manuscript right now, and hopefully we'll be looking at the other ones too. So because that's a whole other context, a whole other issue to make sure that one is sensitive about and representing correctly, especially since I am not Maori. I'm not an Indigenous Canadian either. So that was incredibly important as well. And Judy at Black Wolf Editorial Services, my New Zealand editor, she was not Maori, so that's why I had to have a separate person look into that. While she just sort of looked at the overall technical New Zealand aspects, the landscape, the places, how they got there, the creatures to an extent. She's not. It's not like she's a marine biologist or a or at the Department of Conservation there, but she was able at least to very much ask me questions about them if she didn't know the answers to, so that I could look further and check with people at the Department of Conservation at
Right.
New Zealand. So yeah,
So there
yeah.
was a lot involved with Peter
Yes.
Littlewing. That is, and just by all the different birds, like even just the
Yep.
names of them were just like, that is such an odd name. Like it's different, and it sounds like there would have been a lot to go into
Yes.
that.
And most of them, I assume actually all of them, have an English name, these birds, and a Maori name. But those who, like, for example, kiwi, that one doesn't have an English name. That kiwi specifically comes from Maori. So that is, some would strictly have a Maori name, whereas others would have two names, like the little blue penguin, which is Onion, Peter's bestie. Um, she's a little blue penguin in English, also called little fairy or fairy penguins or little penguins, but they are called korora in Maori. So a lot of the birds have two names, depending, on which language you're referring to. And the ones that I find that have only one name, that name will be Maori. So it's pretty cool.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
the most
Kiwi.
unusual, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, very unusual, and but it makes it interesting, and then it leaves for more questions like where did that name come from, and what, so I think for kids that really would spark high interest in
Yeah. Yes.
create imagination, and what about this, and
Yeah.
so that's good.
And there are resources in the back of the book as well, terms and explanations and a glossary as well that that explain a little more about some of the places and creatures. And of course, students and readers can, easily Google any of these things and find out loads more information.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Wow. Okay, that's awesome. So you were saying the other manuscript
Mhm.
that they were looking at for you. Now, is that pertaining to another book on Peter Littlewing,
Yes.
or is this, yes? Okay.
Yep, they're looking at book two. Yes.
Right. Okay.
Peter Littlewing in the Bay of Islands is the name of that one. So yeah.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
Yes.
More interesting stuff to come. That
Yes,
sounds
it'll come out.
awesome.
Yeah, it'll come out in I believe August or so, 2025. So
Okay.
yeah.
Right. Okay. So where can we find Peter Littlewing?
Online you can find it anywhere, of course, Amazon and all the usual places. And of course, Pandemonium Publishing House carries it on their online store and at their events. And I do tons of events as well, and have copies available there. It can be purchased directly through my website as well, which is a good way for you, if you're not able to make it to an event, to get the book signed by me too. I can sign it for you and send it
And
off
send
that
it
way.
right to you. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
And that's just reganwhmacaulay.com. Yeah, so
So
easy way to
I'll
get it.
get all your links,
Mhm.
and I will put it in below the video on the YouTube video. So that way, once everybody listens to the first chapter and wants to read more, because they're gonna want to, they can just click on those links and go right to your book. And yeah, we'll do that, and that'll be good. So thank you, Regan, for taking your time, because I know you're a busy lady as well. You do other things. So yeah, not just writing books, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
I know you have other things going on in the background there. So I'll let you go, and we'll get those links for our readers, and we'll go from there. But I know we will have you on again because you have other books as well for younger readers. So we'll have you on with one of those books as well. So thank you for reading the first chapter of Peter Littlewing, and you have a great night
You too,
or
and thank
day, the rest of your
oh,
day.
yes, yeah. And thank you so much for having me again. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, you're very welcome. Okay, so we'll see you later. Bye-bye.